Good afternoon, members. I would like to welcome you all to this meeting. That is the subcommittee on 3 pieces of legislation related to road traffic. It's time to start. We formed a quorum, so I call the meeting to order. Item 1 on the agenda. That is the late membership application from Mr. Michael LUK. On the 16th of September this year, he wrote to the Secretariat asking for late membership application, and the paper has been sent to you along with the agenda, and that is CB bracket 11397/2025-01. In accordance with the House Rules, Rule 23B, late membership application should be considered by the subcommittee. So what are your views? Would you agree? All right, thank you. Endorsed. Item 2 on the agenda, meeting with the administration. At this moment, I would like to invite the public officers to join us. I would like to welcome the representatives from the Bureau, Mr. Edward Mack, Deputy Secretary for Transport and Logistics 3, Ms. Zheng Ling, PAS for Transport and Logistics 2, Mr. Sam Zi, AS for Transport and Logistics 2A. Representing the police, we have Mr. Mike Fang, Superintendent Law Revision and Projects Division, Mr. Francis Leung, Chief Superintendent of Police Traffic Branch, and Mr. Stephen Chong, Chief Inspector Law Revision and Projects Division. As to the other public officers, their names are on the attendance list. I won't go over them here. So I'll give the floor to the Bureau to walk us through the policy issues. So would it be Mr. Edward Mack that would brief us on the 3 pieces of subsidiary legislation related to road traffic? I think Mr. Mack has a PowerPoint presentation. I open the floor to members later for your questions concerning the policy aspects of the subsidiary legislation. Over to you, Mr. Mack. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Well, the administration has introduced 3 pieces of subsidiary legislation covering 2 items so as to further enhance road safety. Let me start with a brief opening speech, and then that will be followed by our departmental staff. First of all, that's in relation to the fitting and wearing of seat belts and safer seats. In other words, Road Traffic Construction and Maintenance of Vehicles Amendment Number 2, Regulation 2025, Road Traffic Safety Equipment Amendment Regulation 2025 are relevant. And that's about the mandatory requirement to fit and wear seat belts. It will be mandatory, and the requirements will be extended to all newly registered public means of transport and commercial vehicles, covering buses, private light buses, goods vehicles, and special purpose vehicles. If the seats are already fitted with a seat belt, then the passenger must wear it. And then in relation to student service vehicles, we're saying that all such vehicles, covering both existing as well as newly registered SSVs, must be fitted with the seat belts and safer seats after a certain date so as to enhance road safety for students. The second proposal is in relation to the use of mobile telecommunications devices by drivers while driving, and would like to tighten it. And that comes under Road Traffic Control Amendment Number 2, Regulation 2025. So while driving, if a driver would like to use a mobile phone, a laptop, or a tablet computer, we will prescribe the maximum number of devices, the size of the screen, etc., so as to further enhance road safety. Mr. Chairman, when we prepared the proposals, the administration did extensively consult the views of the stakeholders, and we have also taken on board the feedback collected. We approached the panel on transport of the electrical. We also approached the various representatives of the trade and road safety council, etc. We consulted more than 100 stakeholders, like the representatives of taxi trade, student service, prehab groups, disabled persons groups. More than half of them are in agreement that we should limit the total number of devices to be used while driving. There is no more than 2. Most of them are in support of the safety-related proposals. We have been in constant liaison with the stakeholders, and we have already reached consensus. Well, we have struck a balance between the need to enhance road safety and the needs of the trade. All the 3 of them are subject to negative vetting, and they will come into effect unless otherwise stated in the paper or in the subsidiary legislation. It will come into effect in 2026 on the date of 25th of January. And please allow the TD to make use of the PowerPoints to give you a brief introduction. Will it be Mr. Wu? Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Let me first of all talk about the requirements concerning safety belts. When you wear a safety belt, it will offer critical protection to passengers, especially young students. Well, under the new requirements, now, for those newly registered on or after the 25th of January 2026, the following classes of vehicles and in relation to the relevant seats must be fitted with safety belts, like buses, including franchise buses and student service vehicles, covering all the passenger seats, private light buses, including SSVs, as well as goods vehicles. I'm referring to the rear seats, as well as the driver's seat and all passenger seats of special purpose vehicles. If the seats are already fitted with seat belts, the driver or the passenger must wear them, and they will come into effect on the 25th of January 2026. It is important because it will be good to enhance their safety awareness. Under the new requirement, it means that for the existing SSVs on or before the specified date, the seats must be fitted with the seat belts or they have safer seats. Otherwise, they cannot provide student service after the relevant date. In the light of the fact that the age profile of the SSVs, as well as the latest changes in the trading environment of the sector, we are specifying the 31st of December 2028 as the date that the seat belt requirements will come into operation, so to strike a balance. Less than 5% of such SSVs are not yet equipped with such safety belts and safer seats. The second proposal is to cover the use of mobile telecommunication devices while driving. We try to strike a balance between the development of the trade as well as the need to enhance road safety. Mobile telephone devices means mobile phones, tablet computers, and laptop computers. We are seeing that the quantity should be confined to no more than 2, and the diagonal length of each screen not exceeding 19 cm. In the year 2022, we briefed the transport panel, and it is a bit larger or longer than that proposed in that paper. This dimension will cover the majority of the models in the market. For the position, for folded phones, as long as the screen is no more than 19 cm, it will be acceptable. In a moment, I'm going to elaborate on that. And then for the position to be placed, there will be certain requirements, but then it will not cover devices exclusively used by passengers only. And then the position must not obstruct the driver's view. And it will come into effect on the 25th of January 2026. I will talk about the folded phones. The majority of them would be under 7 inches, but a small number of them a little bit longer than 7 cm, like 7.1 cm, etc. It will still be under the requirement of no more than 19 cm. Well, basically, the majority of them can comply with the requirements and they can be placed in the vehicles. For the folded type of phones, some will fold inwards. When it is extended, generally speaking, it will be having a length of more than 7.5 inches. When it is closed, or when it is folded up, it will be less than that. For those that are folded outwards, again, when it is extended, it will be more than 7.5. For those that can be folded 3 times, then it will be larger than 10 inches. But when they are folded, it will be under 7.5 inches, so they can be placed in a vehicle. So on that note, I end my briefing. Thank you, Mr. Mack. Thank you, Mr. Wu, for your briefing. I now open the floor to members so that you can ask questions concerning the policy issues. Well, I see that 9 members would like to queue up to ask questions in such an order. Michael Tian, Chao Siu-chung, Nishin Lam, Chen Han-pang, Andrew Lam, Stephen Ho, Kenneth Lau, Tony Che, and Lillian Kwok. So for the time being, 4 minutes each for both your Q&A. Mr. Michael Tian. Thank you, Chair. According to the current proposals, in relation to the liability of wearing seat belts, well, you get a $320 fixed penalty ticket if a driver doesn't wear a seat belt. When it is a serious case, you can attract a fine of $5,000 or imprisonment of 3 months. But then when it comes to the passengers, you haven't got the option of paying a fixed penalty ticket. Well, in this case, it means that the law enforcement agencies will find it difficult to discharge the duties. For a light bus, there may be 10 passengers or 10 people not wearing a seat belt. Now, does it mean that you have to take all of them to court? It will be difficult to operate in this way. I know that the police is present, the police is represented here. Do you really have that time to have undercover operation and take all of them, all the offending passengers or driver to court? I find it difficult to understand. Why can't you also make passengers pay a fixed penalty ticket as well? It's easier to operate, and it is a mere $320. But then I would say that it is having a higher deterrent effect. Now, for light buses, drivers and passengers must wear seat belts. In the year 2023, in the month of September, I know there is a detector system. When a passenger is not wearing his seat belt, there will be an alarm, there will be an alert. We thought that passengers will be more aware, but then you know that people can always outwit them. Passengers would just ignore the beeping sound of the alarm or the detector. And drivers find them too annoying. It is too noisy. So the driver tries to turn down the volume of the beeper. So it is to no avail. You spend a lot of money to pay for the detector. You have to pay more by way of an increase in the fare level. But it doesn't matter whether you wear the seatbelt or not, so it is not effective. Now I have got this idea. It may not be music to your ears, but then Hong Kong must change our long-established habit. And for us to achieve success, we need to be tough. We must have a sense of civic awareness. I think we need to take the initiative to wear the seat belt. I think we must have a 3-in-1 policy. We must disallow drivers from turning down the volume of the sensor so that we'll be watching each other. And then for passengers that are not complying with the requirement, fixed penalty ticket. And there should be more inspection and there should be more prosecution so as to have a stronger deterrent effect. Would you consider that? If not, even though more vehicles are fitted with safety belts, but then they're useless. So 2 questions and 1 comment. Mr. Mack, would you like to take the questions? And then in relation to the detector system, do you think that there's room for improvement? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Tian, for his points. Of course, I agree very much with Mr. Tian. That is, we must give first priority to safety, and civic-mindedness is of utmost importance. We have to enhance the awareness of wearing seatbelts. We are taking a step forward in relation to safety belt requirements. That requirement is being extended to other vehicles. In a moment, the TD will talk about the detector of the safety belts. I think they can elaborate on that point. We'll also invite the police to talk about law enforcement. But then first of all, what we are doing is to make reference to the existing legal requirements. In other words, the passenger doesn't have the option of being given a fixed penalty ticket in a case of non-compliance. This is the existing requirement, and this is being extended to the existing classes of vehicles. We don't rule out the possibility that in order to simplify and streamline the law enforcement and to make sure that it is going to be effective, we can consider in future whether we will use fixed penalty tickets as well to deal with the passenger non-compliance. But of course, when it comes to law enforcement, it is important to step up the public education. So, Chair, with your permission, I would like to give the floor to the TD as well as the police. Would it be Mr. Ang? Thank you, Chair. In relation to the detector system for wearing seat belts, the TD has got a requirement. The volume of the sound must not be too high, otherwise it would distract the driver. But of course, we are afraid that it will affect the safety of the passengers. Of course, as Mr. Michael Tian has said, if the volume is too low, then it will not be effective. Sometimes a passenger is just forgetful and has forgotten to wear the seatbelt. I think they just made a special effort to lower the volume. Well, in that case, it is a matter of breaching the requirement. In this case, we can follow this up, and we will ask for this to be reinstated so as to return the volume to the normal level. Police, anything to add? Thank you, Mr. Michael Tian, for your points. The police has got three aspects: publicity, education, and then enforcement, three areas of our work. All the time, we have been looking at the KSI data. There is killing, serious injuries and injuries, and we have territory-wide campaigns and operations. Wearing seat belts while on a public light bus is one of our focal areas. We have been launching such an operation from time to time and in different places. As Mr. Michael Tian has said, we did have undercover operation. What about the idea of a fixed penalty tickets? Would it facilitate your law enforcement? Fixed penalty tickets, I understand that the Bureau and the Department are giving serious consideration. I think Mr. Mack has answered the question. In future, they would consider whether there's a need to turn it into a fixed penalty ticket. Next, Mr. Chow. Thank you, Chair. In order to enhance road safety, now there are two proposals to change the law. You have my support, but then I do want to share my concerns with you, and I want to get some clarifications. For seat belts, it is not difficult to fit the seat belts. The important point is whether passengers are wearing them. Now, the government is probably going to extend it to non-franchise buses and the public light buses. So we are talking about a huge number of seat belts and a huge number of scenarios. What about publicity and law enforcement? Do you have any plans to do that so as to make sure that the policy can be implemented and the laws will be effective? That's the first point. Second point is that have you ever assessed the following for our franchise public buses? Who will be safer when you stand and hold tight to the railing, or if you are seated but you don't have the seat belt? So have you ever carried out an assessment? Now, if if you say that while you are seated and wearing a seatbelt, that's safer, then does it mean that we should cancel the standing seats? I mean the standees. But of course, it's unrealistic to ban any passengers from standing. But of course, it is advisable for people not to prefer to stand while there are still empty seats. They should get a seat instead because they're safer. So do you think that you should publicize that message? And then for the mobile telecommunication devices, in paragraph 14, it is said that a $650 fixed penalty tickets can be issued by the police in the case of a serious matter. It can be referred to the court for trial. What does it mean to warrant a case to become a more serious one? Using the phones too frequently or what? Can you elaborate on that point?
19cm 嗰度呢，
We have also talked about the dimension of the screen, the diagonal screen of 19 cm. Well, actually, there are many changes to mobile phones, and maybe next year or later, the sizes of the mobile phones may change and will be exceeding 20 cm. So is there a mechanism for amending this requirement? So two sets of questions from Mr. Chow about the standees. Is it safer to be a standee, or is it safer to be seated without wearing a seatbelt? The second question concerns the MTDs. And Mr. Mack, please. Thank you. I would ask my colleagues from TD to talk about the publicity and education, and then also the police to talk about preparation for enforcement actions. And also, when would be considered as a case for issuing a fixed penalty ticket, and when would be serious cases for taking the offender to court. First, about the standees in buses. I remember that at the transport panel meeting, we talked about this issue. I think we have to strike a balance. We need to look at the operational needs of buses, and also we have to balance the safety requirements. So Mr. Chow has suggested the deletion of standees. I think this is impracticable. When we look at the case in other countries, they do allow passengers to stand on buses, and they do not require them to wear seat belts. And we have also imposed a requirement on the bus companies. So when they procure new buses, they would have to have more continuous railings, and then they also have to have railings near the exits, and then also they have to use non-skid materials on the buses, and they should have wider corridors. So there will be more measures to enhance the safety of passengers on the lower deck of the buses. On publicity and public education, we will encourage the passengers to sit whenever there are seats available. May I now defer to my colleagues from TD and the police? Mr. Au from Transport Department. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Au. On promotion and publicity, we have the installation of seatbelts on a number of vehicles, but the current legislation do not require the wearing of seatbelts on such types of vehicles. That's why we want to fix the day as the 26th of January next year will be the day for requiring the passengers that they have to wear a seatbelt if a seatbelt is installed on the seat. So we have been preparing for a lot of promotion and publicity activities. We have been liaising with the franchise operators closely, and we would encourage the passengers to wear seatbelts when they ride on buses, and also we will continue to have publicity and public education at the bus stops. Also inside the bus compartments, we will be posting posters, and then also there are digital displays within the buses, and we'll make use of those facilities to remind the passengers that if they are seated on a seat with seatbelts, they should wear it. So we want to enhance the safety of passengers and also to change their habits so that we can enhance safety. So now I would defer the time to my colleague from the police, Mr. Leung. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chow. On paragraph 20 of the paper, we are talking about the situation whereby if our colleagues are patrolling and they see that a driver is displaying two MTDs on the dashboard or they are using the mobile phone and there are no other complicated cases, then we will enforce the fixed penalty ticket of $675. But if a traffic accident is involved or if the driver is weaving between the lanes because he is talking on the phone, it involves dangerous driving or reckless driving, then we would make use of the criminal proceedings, the more serious one, of a fine of $2,000. Next, Ms. Nixie Lam. Thank you, Chair. I also want to ask a question about the use of seat belts. It is required that the drivers of student service have to require the passengers to use seat belts. But then these students are usually rather young, and it is difficult to control them. If they refuse or if they cry and they don't want to wear the seat belt, then what can the driver do? Is it a requirement for the driver to stop the vehicle and deal with the case first? Otherwise, will he be responsible for the incident? Because I think such a situation may happen, and it may happen frequently. So how are we going to tackle this, and how are we going to have law enforcement concerning this? Mr. Mack? Thank you, Ms. Lam. Talking about the requirement for passengers under the age of 15, the requirement is that if there are middle front seats and if a passenger under the age of 15 is seated there, then the driver has to ensure that the passenger is wearing a seat belt. So we would extend this provision to the goods vehicles and special purpose vehicles, but not the student service vehicles. So we are not extending that to the SSVs. So for student service vehicles, the responsibility to wear the seatbelt lies with the passenger, but we will issue guidelines. For the passenger service license, there will be provisions requiring the provision of an escort on the student service bus, and the escort will remind the children to wear seatbelts before the driver starts driving. And also during the drive, the escort will ensure that or see if the students are wearing seatbelts. So for student service vehicles, the passengers will be responsible. How about PLBs? If the passengers is under the age of 15 riding a PLB without a seatbelt, who bears the responsibility, the driver or the passenger? Mr. Mack? Well, the situation is the same. It's the same as in the case of a student service vehicle. The responsibility or the liability lies with the passenger. But I think Ms. Lam is focusing on passengers who are under the age of 15. They may be naughty, they may not be aware of the situation. Well, some of them may be only 14 years of age, but then have a 108 cm high. So where does the liability lies, with the driver or with the passenger? Well, I think for the student service vehicle, the liability lies with the passenger. I talked about passengers under the age of 15. So for students who are seated in the front seats or the middle front seats, this requirement will be extended to the GVs and the SPVs. Under such circumstances, the driver will be responsible because the number of passengers is few. So the driver can be responsible, and it has to ensure that his drivers are wearing seatbelts. I understand that you have clarified about the situation of student service vehicles. I'm asking about other types of vehicles. Does that cover PLBs? How about private cars? Can you give a simple explanation which will be included, which will not be included? I want to know what will be the liability for the drivers if a youngster refuses to wear a seatbelt. Under what circumstances will the driver be responsible for that? Well, Chairman, members, well, for the electoral brief, there is an Annex D. We have a table there setting out the liabilities of wearing seatbelts. So you can see that if the passenger breaches the requirement for wearing seatbelts, if it is a passenger from a taxi, a PLB, a bus, then Well, bus would include school buses. Then the liability lies with the passenger of not wearing a seatbelt, and the driver does not bear any responsibility. You are answering my question the other way round. I'm asking under what circumstances will the driver be responsible? Can you give me a strict answer? Well, Mr. Mack, can you take us through Annex D? So apart from school bus, we also talked about the private cars, taxis, etc. Annex D actually sets out very clearly the liabilities for different types of vehicles. Yes, if we look at Annex D, for private cars, private light bus, goods vehicles, and special purpose vehicles, the drivers will bear the liability if the passenger is not wearing a seatbelt. Next, Mr. Chen Hangpeng. Thank you, Chair. I support the proposed amendment regulations. These are important legislative amendments. On the modes of the prosecution, I understand that the administration would try to use fixed penalty ticket in future as far as possible. Otherwise, it will take a long time for the criminal proceedings to proceed, and the police also have to take enforcement action, and it also affects the operation of the courts. So I hope that in future, the administration would think about greater use of fixed penalty tickets. On seatbelts, there may be a situation whereby there are seatbelts for the seated passengers, but there are passengers who are standees and they don't have a seatbelt, and they may wonder about their own safety. So they may think that they are not entirely safe. I think we also have to think about the passengers on the upper deck. When there are bus accidents, there will be standees who are thrown out of the bus when there is a traffic accident. So I think it is important to wear seatbelts on the upper deck of buses as well. There are also suggestions about seatbelt fastening alarm systems. I think we can try to conduct that for a trial for a time being. And the beeping sound of the system may be rather annoying and give rise to conflicts. So I think for the time being, maybe we can do without it, and the driver should focus on driving. My question concerns the MTDs, mobile phones. We have specified requirement concerning the diagonal length of the screen, 19 cm. My mobile phone is of 18 cm. Well, in future, with the advancement of technology, there may be cell phones with a diagonal length of 19.1 cm. Then I cannot buy that new mobile phone, and it will cause inconvenience to drivers and passengers. So I hope the administration would review the size of mobile phones from time to time. Well, my phone is also a folding mobile phone. It had quite good functions. When it is opened, I can look at different screens, and then also I can use larger fonts, and it will facilitate the drivers to look at the content. But now folding phones cannot be used. So in future, if you amend the legislation, I think folding mobile phones will become more prevalent, and almost most of them may be able to be folded. So if it is unfolded, can you consider that as two phones instead of one? So for the general non-foldable mobile phones, you can allow the use of two such devices. And also, can we confine the length rather than the number of devices? So would you review these requirements from time to time, say every several years? And also we look at the enforcement situation. Mr. Mack, Mr. Chan has two suggestions and two questions. So I hope the administration will consider his two suggestions. For the two questions, one concerns about the folding phones. Would you consider them as two mobile devices if they are unfolded? And also, would you review the requirements periodically? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chen. I will ask my TD colleagues to elaborate more on the requirements concerning the folding phones and the counting of the number of such devices. When we last went to the transport panel meeting, we talked about this, and we also tried to take a look at the more popular mobile phones after that meeting, and we found that there are more foldable phones rolled out into the market. That's why we have extended the diagonal length of the screen to 19 cm, adding 1 cm. Well, for the mobile phone, if they are displayed in front of the driver, it may also block part of the sight of the driver. So we have tried to strike a balance so the mobile phones cannot be too large in size. But we do agree with members that we should review the requirements following the enactment of the amendment regulation and also the development of mobile phones in the market. And we'll see whether the legislation need to be further updated. So can I ask my TD colleagues to supplement? Mr. Au? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chan. Well, we note that recent years, more foldable phones are rolled out in the market. And we would like to see if the foldable phones can be allowed under the amended regulation. Our thinking is that we do not want the screen of the mobile phone to be too large so as to affect the driver from watching out for the road and traffic condition. So for the past few years, we have been liaising with the trade, and the trade do tell us they have to look at different information at the same time, like navigation and then also software for operation. So that's why they would want to have two devices. The advantage is that they do not need to change the display on the device. So we will continue to monitor the situation and the development of the market. If there are major changes, we will definitely try to update the law. Next, Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, Chair. Well, generally, I do support the amendment regulation. My concern focuses on the seat belts. I think it is better to have seat belts than not to have seat belts. But I want to clarify 2 points. Well, I want to refer to Annex D of the paper. I understand that for the liability of the passengers, there are new requirements. But for public transport vehicles, the driver does not have to bear liability or responsibility for the behavior of the passengers. That's my understanding. I support that. However, for passengers under the age of 15, be they youngsters or children, if I look at this table or if I look at the amendment regulation, they have to be responsible for their behavior, and the penalty is $5,000 and imprisonment of 3 months. Well, I understand that there is the juvenile offender ordinance, and there may be cases for exemptions. So I want to see whether my understanding is correct. Even if there is the ordinance available, Ms. Nixie Lam has also touched on the same point. The driver does not have to be liable, but the children or the youngsters do not have to be liable. Then, if the parents or the guardians are around, will they be liable? Well, sometimes when I take public transport, I notice that even if there are seat belts, maybe the design of the seat belts would not be that user-friendly, and the parents may be holding their children in their arms, and they may not help the children to wear the seat belts. So under the Juvenile Offenders Ordinance, will the guardian or the parents present be liable for such acts? Mr. Mack. Thank you, Mr. Lam. Well, first, Ms. Lam has asked a question, and the legal advisor has also asked a question as to whether Cap 226 is applicable. The answer is in the affirmative. The requirement under Cap 226 is that for children under the age of 10, they will not be able to commit an offense. And for children not up to the age of 14 or youngsters between 16 and 14 years of age, if they are prosecuted, even if it can be proved that the offense is committed, the court will not penalize the children, but then the guardians or the parents will have to pay the fines. So this provision will be applicable to the amendment regulation that we're looking at right now. Mr. Lam has also asked that at times the parents do not feel comfortable for their children to use the seat belts. I want to point out that actually we have looked at the studies by the WHO. Actually, it would help to reduce injury by about 32% if the young children wear seatbelts. So it is better than not wearing a seatbelt. Secondly, during the public consultation, we have also discussed with the neurologists and the doctors, and they do support that children should wear seatbelts. We now have a requirement, actually.
The TD suggests or proposed that the adult passengers should wear seat belts, and they should also, for children at the age of 2 or below, they should hold these babies. Well, it depends on the size of the child. If they are of a certain weight, if they could sit properly, then it is advisable that they should wear their own seat belt. This is the advice of the TD to the parents who are riding these public vehicles with their children or young age child. Next, Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, Chair. I do agree with Mr. Chan's suggestions. Of course, the DAB is also in support of the proposed amendment, and well, my opinion is that the administration, when conducting public consultation, the administration seems to put more emphasis on the drivers. For instance, on how many MTDs the drivers should be allowed to use. But I think the majority of Hong Kong citizens or the Hong Kong drivers, they normally have only one device, one mobile phone. Could we perhaps measure the total length of the devices? And we do not need to specify how many devices should be allowed. As for the diagonal length of screen of the mobile device, 19 cm, well, sometimes it's difficult to be so rigid because for some people who have sight impairment, they might need a bigger screen. But, well, in general, I agree to this proposed amendment. I think the administration should conduct a review and observe very closely on how the situation is going, whether it should be updated. On para 8 of the paper, it's mentioned that no more than 2 MTDs should be allowed, and the diagonal length should not exceed 19 cms. There's a note under para 8. Well, it shows how conservative the administration is when considering this amendment, because originally the requirement was 18 cms, and now it is revised to 19 cms. If in the future, of course Hong Kong can't control the length or diagonal length of the mobile phones coming into the market. Well, if the phones are getting bigger and bigger, what should we do? Or If it's getting smaller and smaller, then the drivers could choose to use more. So I think on this point, we should be flexible, and we should consider more on the economic side and also on safety side. You should perhaps try to see whether the total size or length less than 25 cms would be more desirable. That would be a way to strike a balance that would let the drivers have more options, and it would not compromise road safety. But at this point, I'm still in support of this amendment, but I think the administration should closely observe the situation of the market and see whether these should be adjusted in future. Mr. Mack? Mr. Ho asked if the phones could be measured in the total length instead of the number of devices. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ho. In responding to Mr. Chen, I've already mentioned that we will keep a close monitoring of the market development. Of course, we should strike a balance between the needs of the trade and also road safety. Well, after collecting views from the relevant stakeholders, we would then consider whether these requirements should be amended. For instance, the length or diagonal length of the MTDs. We could review that in due course. Yes, I'd like to thank the administration for coming earlier this morning to explain to us about these proposed amendments. During the course of the discussion, I found that the administration often cited examples from the taxi drivers. For instance, they said that 2 devices would be more suitable to taxi drivers. Well, however, actually, very often the taxi drivers would put their 2 devices in front of them, and in total, the length would be more or less the same as one foldable mobile phone. Yes, this is a view from Mr. Ho. Next, Mr. Kenneth Lau. Thank you, Chair. These proposed amendments will be subject to negative vetting, and I am in support of these. But I have a few questions to the administration. I'd like to ask about the arrangements. I understand that the administration has taken into consideration different factors, for instance, mobile phones, if they are muted. What happens if during law enforcement the drivers hide their additional phones? Well, second, about safety or seat belt. Of course, I agree that it would be safer for passengers to wear seat belts. However, there are still a lot of SSVs that do not have seat belts right now. You now propose that all these should be retrofitted with seat belts by 2028, and that might cause make the cost of the operators higher, and the people in the trade are worried about that. If there are not enough new SSVs in the market, and if the existing ones are not retrofitted with seat belts, what should the administration do? Regarding the maximum number of mobile phones and how we would consider law enforcement, I would defer this question to our colleague from the police. Regarding the existing SSVs without seat belts, our requirement is that by the end of 2028, the existing SSVs should be retrofitted with seat belts or safer seats. Well, our estimate is that by the end of 2028, there would be about only 5% of the SSVs in Hong Kong that are not equipped with seat belts or safer seats. Many years ago, we have already required new SSVs to be equipped with seat belts and safer seats. And these are actually set out in the regulations. We are also keeping in close contact with the trade, and we are sure that by the end of 2028, we believe that most of the SSVs would have seat belts and safer seats installed, and this is the way to enhance road safety. Mr. Leung from the police. Thank you, Chair. The proposed amendment is to enhance the present situation. In the past years, we noticed that taxi drivers and public vehicle drivers often use multiple mobile devices, and that might endanger road safety. That is the background. That is the reason why we propose the present amendments. Now we suggest that a maximum number of 2 devices could be used, and these devices could be put in front of the driver on the dashboard. If they put it somewhere else, for instance in their pocket or somewhere else not on the dashboard, that is all right. We would not control the number of devices that they use. One point of supplement. When we were introducing this proposed amendment, the majority of the people from the taxi trade are in support of them. So it is a consensus, actually, that most of the drivers of the taxi trade agree that 2 devices should be adequate. Mr. Tony said, yes, I agree to the proposed amendments in general, but I have some views or some observations to make. First, about the alarm system or the alert system, detection and alert system. Well, for this system, could the the light be installed outside of the vehicle? That is, it could be shown on the road that this certain vehicle has passengers that are not wearing seat belts. If the system is installed outside of the vehicles, I think that could be a stronger deterrent against non-compliance. Otherwise, it might be difficult for you to carry out law enforcement. There should also be an alternatives. For instance, for fixed penalty tickets, if the driver doesn't agree with the penalty, he could lodge an appeal. As for the vehicles types, what about police cars or the vehicles from the correctional services? Will they be included as well? Well, I haven't gone through the regulation yet. Are there any definitions about the vehicle classes? Next, about the size of the mobile phone or the diagonal length. Is it true that if there is only one device, then there would be no limit, right? You could have a very big mobile phone which exceeds 90 centimeters. Is that right? Is this requirement only applied to the case that when there are 2 devices? All right, regarding fixed penalty tickets, I've answered them multiple times. And regarding the size of the mobile phone, or the vehicle types, I would defer this to my colleague in TD. Regarding the size of the mobile phone, even if there's one mobile phone, well, the diagonal length of the screen of the phone should not exceed 19 centimeters. As regards fixed penalty tickets, we would consider whether it should be extended to passengers as well, not just on the drivers. And regarding the detection and alert system, whether it could be installed outside of the vehicle, I defer it to our colleague in the TD. I do agree that this is it could be considered. This might be a better way to display and to show people that this vehicle is actually having passengers not wearing seatbelts. Yes, thank you, Chair. Regarding the alert system, the purpose of this system is to remind passengers to wear their seat belts. This is a solution that is practical and it is feasible. We have actually discussed with the trade, and they agree that this system should be acceptable. Of course, we'll keep a close eye on the implementation of the system to see whether this is good enough. We could, of course, open to any further suggestions regarding the special purpose vehicles, where they are basically vehicles that are not used to carry passengers or goods. Let me set some concrete examples. For instance, the cranes carrying the vehicles carrying a crane. These is an example of special purpose vehicles. And also the street cleaning vehicle. This is also another type of SPVs. And are there any definition? For instance, what about government vehicles? Otherwise, special purpose vehicles, people might query, what are special purpose vehicles? What about the vehicles from the correctional services carrying prisoners? Well, for the street cleaning vehicle, they are, of course, the properties of the government. They should, of course, they should abide by the law. We're talking about special functions. For instance, the firefighting vehicles. This is a vehicle with special functions. If that is the case, could the regulations be applied to these special function vehicles? You just mentioned that those vehicles carry special functions, so they are not controlled or regulated by the existing regulations. There might be some government vehicles, for instance, carrying prisoners or from the correctional services. But then since they are government vehicles, of course, the existing regulations would apply to them. And they, of course, will have seat belts and so forth. Yes, correct, Chairman. Well, of course, they would be bound by the existing legislation. Next, Ms. Lillian Kwok. Thank you, Chair. I have a few points to make. First, about the timetable. You mentioned the 31st of December 2028 should be installed with seat belts and safer seats. Well, this would enhance road safety. Of course, I am in support of that. But I'm a bit worried, especially for student services vehicles. Well, usually the operator would sign a contract with the school on a yearly basis. Well, for the existing SSVs, if they are not retrofitted with seat belts and safer seats by the end of 2028, what should they do? But the contract is still valid. Their contract with the school would still be valid by that time. I wonder if the administration could step up with publicity and promotion so that before the start of each school year, the school, when signing a contract with the school bus operators, they should be aware of the coming into effect of this new regulation. So you have about 2 years to carry out this publicity. So I think you should let the schools be aware of this new regulation so that when they are going to sign new contract with the school bus operators, they should bear that in mind. Second, about the role of the carers or the nannies in the school bus. I noticed that in the school bus or SSVs for kids under the age of 15, if they are not wearing seat belt, I'd like to know whether the student should bear the responsibility or the escort should be liable. The answer is yes, Chairman. Yes. In school buses, the passengers, be they 15 or under the age of 15, as long as they are a passenger in the school bus, they should wear a seat belt, and if not, they should be held liable. Then I have a follow-up question. The duty or the responsibility of the escort in the school bus. For instance, the students, student passengers in the school bus, if they're naughty or playing around or running around, and if they want to open the rear door of the school bus, of course the escort would release their own seatbelt and then go to, for instance, discipline the school kids. Well, what would happen if that is the case? For instance, the school bus is still going on. For instance, in a tunnel, the school bus cannot slow down or stop by the side. And also in the morning, very often the drivers are in a rush and they have to be to reach the school on time. So under that situation, what would the escort be held liable? That is, if he or she unbuckle her seatbelt and then go to handle the case or the situation of the school kids in the school bus.
Thank you, Ms. Kwok. Now, in relation to the first point, we are grateful to the member for reminding us of the need to have publicity and education. We'll do that well in advance. Well, for each academic year, for the August preceding the commencement of school term, we do come up with guidelines for schools' reference. We're grateful to your advice. That is, the deadline of 31st December 2028 should be highlighted to school operators so that when they sign new contracts with operators, they are well aware of it in advance. As to why we try to draw a line at the end of 2028, well, we know that there are just a small number of service providers that can fit the seatbelts for the schools as well as the student service vehicle owners. So we want them to make good use of the winter school holidays. Now, if someone is not wearing a seatbelt and if the escort has to approach the passenger to deal with the scenario, well, in fact, in the regulation, we do provide for the defense of reasonable excuse. Well, if a passenger doesn't wear a seatbelt without a reasonable excuse, then in fact this can be relied upon as a defense to explain why that he or she has got that behavior. Well, I've got another question. May I? Yes, please. In relation to the mobile telecommunication device, like in the case of student service vehicles, they often use walkie-talkies, which haven't got a screen. Now, for the paper you have provided to us, for mobile telecommunication devices, you are talking about a size requirement of a 19 cm diagonal length. So does it mean that the walkie-talkie is not being covered by the definition of an MTD? Mr. Mack. Well, under the regulation, walkie-talkies are not being covered, so it is not applicable. Ms. Kwok, do you have other follow-ups? Indeed, one more, Chair. For those aged below the age of 2, we have got many nursery classes for such children under the age of 2. Well, in the past, for such 3-point type safety belts, probably they don't fit. And in fact, we have already just passed a regulation concerning the self-restraining devices. So do you know what's going to happen about such children? I'd like to defer to the TD. Thank you. Well, according to the World Health Organization's advice for young children who are school children, they should wear seat belts because the likelihood of getting injured will be reduced by 32%. For neurosurgeons, among other doctors, they also subscribe to the same idea. For student service vehicles, other than the requirement to fit safety belts, there are additional protective gears to protect them. Say, for example, they must have safer seats. In the case of a collision, other than the safety belt, there will be another soft cushion in front of them to reduce the magnitude of their injuries. In the year 2021, on the 4th of June, there was a very serious traffic accident involving school buses. At that time, it was on the fast lane of Taichung Road. Owing to one reason or other, it went to the slow lane and then it rushed down to a cycling path. 53 school children were on board and they were studying at primary 2 levels. The vehicle itself was seriously damaged, but only 23 children got lightly injured and they were able to be discharged from hospital within the same day. So you can see that with the safety seats, safer seats, as well as the safety belts, it did help a lot. So for both schools and other stakeholders, they are really happy to fit the safety belts as well as the safer seats. 90% of the vehicles are already fitted with such devices, welcomed by the parents as well as the school authorities. I'm afraid he missed my main point. I'm concerned about those aged 2 or below. For those studying at nursery classes, they are probably age 2. For those who are age 2 or 3 years old, it's fine for them to wear the normal seat belts. But for those who are really young, it may not be good for them, and they may in fact be choked by the 3-point safety belts. They have to use the lap belt. So what about your take concerning the body restraining seat belt? Understand that many parents are equally worried as Ms. Kwok. That is for those that are of a smaller build, and in the case of inappropriate seat belts, in the case of an accident, the seat belt itself may cause injuries like crushing the chest bones or the neck, the throat. So this in turn has caused a concern among the parents and teachers. So why don't you take this opportunity to ease the worries on their part? Well, whether you have got a seatbelt or not, it makes a great difference. Well, in the case of children under the age of 2, now assuming that they can sit properly on the seat, well, most of the vehicles that provide student service have lap belts. So I think in the case of an accident, at least the children won't be thrown out of the seats. And in addition, we've got safer seats, and so both can provide good protection. So the lap belt is helpful too. Anybody else having a policy question? Mr. Lee Chung-hung. Thank you, Chair. We welcome the proposals to step up the road safety by having the mandatory requirement concerning seat belts for taxi drivers and for the trades, for the different stakeholders of the different sectors. Sometimes they may have quite a large number of mobile phones above their dashboard. It looks like that they are mirroring the air pilots, but then it is indeed distracting. So your proposals are saying that at most they can have 2 devices and the total diagonal length can only be 19 cm. In other words, they mustn't use the large size iPads. I welcome your proposal. Can I ask a further question concerning the size of the screen? I think usually commercial drivers would like to use the mobile devices so as to handle their orders. And then others may use the phones to navigate to bring them to their destination. But do you worry that sometimes people may want to have the phone there to watch a drama on the screen or to watch racing? And then many screens are up to the size of 19 cm. But then you can have split screens, right? Does it mean that they can, it would be distracting their attention and they may be touching the screen to operate the phones? Can you do something to prevent them from playing with their devices? Mr. Mack. Thank you, Mr. Lee. When we drafted the legislation, we said that at most you could have 2 devices above the dashboard. We try to strike a balance between the needs of the driver, like he may want to navigate the streets or he has to take orders from their clients. As it stands, the driver cannot take hold of a phone and use it while holding it in his hand, and he can't have it positioned between the head and the neck and the shoulder. And then, of course, there are also other offenses like careless driving or dangerous driving. Now, if a driver, as a result of using a mobile phone, say, for example, the driver is trying to shift the screens all the time, resulting in careless driving or other behavior, then it will be subject to law enforcement by the police. So other defenses would be relevant, and we can rely on that to make sure that the drivers will drive carefully. The member also talked about the use of split screens. Currently, what we are seeing is that the size requirement would be 19 cm. We won't allow larger screens or having 2 screens being put together because we're worried that they may want to split the screen, so that at the same time the driver is reading different sort of information that will be too distracting. Just now, members had talked about the advancement of technology, and they also referred to the experience of the law enforcement agencies. So we don't rule out the possibility of the need to update the requirements. Other than the mobile phones, I think in fact there are smart glasses as well, and it is quite common on the mainland. I think such has to be regulated as well. Now, when it comes to driving, safety is of utmost importance, and you mustn't allow your attention to be distracted. So can we not say that you can only use the mobile devices for certain purposes only? Now, we have got mainland vehicles from the Guangdong province coming down to Hong Kong, making southward trips. What about such drivers? Well, the member referred to Guangdong vehicles coming south. Well, for drivers from overseas, from Macau, from Guangdong, in particular vehicles from Guangdong, we have already put together some information. We have got tips included in a driver's kit, online and offline, so as to familiarize the drivers with our requirements. I agree with members that we have to be aware of the advancement of technology. We have got offenses like careless driving, reckless driving, dangerous driving, irrespective of the devices used. Now, as to whether whenever there is a new device, we have to change our law. Well, of course, we are aware of the possibility. We know that there are LED eyeglasses, and in fact, currently, if someone is using such devices and that affects his driving, in fact, we can take enforcement action against such a driver. Do you have other questions concerning the policy aspects of the subsidiary legislation? No, in that case, we have covered that part. Well, before we move into the cross-wire cross-scrutiny, I just want to consult your views. Do you think that we need to invite submissions from the public in relation to the 3 pieces of legislation? Mr. Lee, I don't think so. We need to do such. I think many citizens are looking forward to the introduction of the sub-lag because everybody is hoping that there will be further road safety measures. Mr. Lam, Dr. Lam, no need. Ms. Kwok, I also think that there's no need for that. For road safety, all the way from the year 2022, we've been expecting this set of subsidiary legislation. I'm sure the TD has had sufficient consultation, so I don't think we need to have public consultation once again. So your views are noted. Stephen, do you have anything to say? Let me come to my point directly. I also agree that there's no need for public consultation. This is because if we try to do so, then it means that we won't be able to pass it within the current term. And it means that the young children will have to run the risk again. I think it's better for us to pass the law and then we keep it in view and try to update it whenever there is a need to do so. We are aware of the content of the subsidiary legislation. There may be minor defects, but then they are insignificant. Thank you, members. I think the majority of those who spoke have said that there is no need to have a public consultation. So we will then start to deal with the so-called cross-wire cross-scrutiny. I would suggest that we go to the Chinese version of the subsidiary legislation. Our legal advisor will examine the English version. So, members, please note, and equally, public officers, please note, that is, let's make use of the marked-up copy prepared by our LSD. In other words, papers 1398/2025 bracket 01 to bracket 03 to facilitate other in order to facilitate the understanding on the part of the public, please refer to the pagination in the middle of the page of such papers. Mr. Mack or Ms. Zhang, please brief us on the individual clauses. Now, in the course of scrutiny, if you would like to ask questions, please press the request to speak button. Well, 4 minutes each for the Q&A. So, what about the first one? 01? All right, thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair. We will be scrutinizing road traffic, construction and maintenance of vehicles, Amendment number 2, Regulation 2025. In other words, LN 194 of 2025. Please go to B5590. This is not found in the English version, but you get it in the Chinese version. This is in relation to the existing requirements concerning the safer seats and seat belts. It will be extended to the student service vehicles, including the newly registered vehicles in relation to the passenger seats. Which page are you referring to? We have got a marked up copy. It is not indicated on your marked up copy, but then it can be found on page B5590 of the Gazette notice. Again, the second one is not found on the English version. Please go to B5590 of the Chinese version.
Number 2 is the amendment to the Road Traffic Construction and Maintenance of Vehicles Regulations amended. For Clause 3, it is on 004 page. It amends Clause 73 concerning passenger seats. We repeal the date of vehicles registered after the 1st of May 2009. And the existing requirement about safer seats will be extended to all SSVs, all the passenger seats on there. So you're talking about page 0004. Do members have any questions on that? Concerns Clause 1, bracket AA. For Clause 4, we are now looking at page 00014 to 0004. We are amending Schedule 15. And we will repeal the requirements. So all the international requirements will be extended to all the passenger seats. So for Part 5, 3, and 4, we will amend the Chinese version. And the wording, register on or after 1st of May 2009, will be deleted. So you are now looking at page 0001 and 0002. For some of them, it is only textual amendments. Yes, correct. Any questions? No? Please move on. So we have completed scrutiny of LN 194. Yes, the amendments have been completed. Next, it is a Road Traffic Safety Equipment Amendment Regulations, Regulation 2025 LN 195. The first amendment is not included in the markup version, so please look at page B5598. It is stated that apart from requirements in Part 2, so the amendments will take place in 2006. So it also covers the existing and new vehicles. And it will come into effect on the 31st of December 2028. Any questions from members? Please move on. For Clause 2, the amendment is also not stated in the markup copy. Please look at page B5602. Clause 2 says that we amend the Road Traffic Safety Equipment Regulations, and we will introduce the proposed amendments. There are 23 such clauses from Section 3 to Section 23. Any questions? For Clause 3, it is on page 3 to page 8 of the amended version. Clause 3 amends Clause 2 of the existing legislation on interpretation. Clause 3, bracket 1, repeal the word approved, and also substitute it with a new definition concerning seat with integral seat belt anchorages. So the wordings are the same, but you move that to Clause 6. Yes, we try to make the requirements clearer here. So it is an amendment on page 0003. Any questions? No? Please move on. And next, for the English version, we have some technical amendments. For Clause 3, bracket 4, we delete the date on the effective date because it is already stated in Clause 1, so we try to repeal that. It is only a technical amendment. No questions? And then clause 3, bracket 5, we included 2 new definitions concerning student service vehicles and passenger seat. So you are now on page 5. Yes, correct. So for this, we add the definition about passenger seats and also definitions concerning student service vehicle. Yes, that's correct, Chairman. Any questions? No? Please move on. For clause 3, bracket 6 and 7, we include bracket 4, 5, and 7. And it is to reflect Schedule 2, which has been included, governing seat belts and anchorage points, and then also integral seat belts, and they will be applicable to different classes of vehicles. No question? Please move on. Clause 4, we're now on page 9 of the markup version. It amends Part 3 of the legislation, and we add Division 1 and also Subdivision 1, the heading of that. For Division 1, it covers private cars, taxis, light buses, goods vehicles, and special purpose vehicles. For Subdivision 1, it stipulates the requirements concerning seat belts and anchorages points for the above types of vehicles. On page 9, for clause 6, you talk about seat belts and anchorage points, and you try to add for driver's seat and specify passenger seats. Are you trying to make it clearer here? Yes. Well, actually, the requirements have been stated in clause 1, and you already says the driver's seat and the specified passenger seat in clause 6, bracket 1A and B. Yes, that's correct. Any questions? Please move on. And we are now on page 10. It amends Regulation 6. And we try to extend the requirements concerning the driver seats and the specified driver seats. The requirements will be extended to vehicles which have been registered after the 25th of January 2026, exempting school private light bus, because we will have school private light bus requirements spelled out in the latter part of this amendment regulation. So there will be there will be further amendments. Yes. Where are we now? Page 9? Well, page 9 and page 3, Chairman. Well, there are 7-seater vehicles, so the seats will be facing forward or backward. So how are we going to deal with the seat belts for such vehicles with seats facing backwards? Well, usually you have a seat next to the driver, and then you have 2 seats in the middle, and you have 3 seats in the rear row. But then for some vehicles, they have 2 seats facing backwards and other seats facing forward. So is this provision adequate to cover such a scenario? Or there are no such vehicles at all? Well, for these vehicles, we will consider the seats as seats for passengers. Which clause cover that? We are now looking at amendment regulation. Can you point out to me which specific provision that you are talking about? It is very important. Is it under the definition section on page 3? Because it is not a private light bus. Middle seats, are you talking about that? Well, you can look at page 5. We have a new definition concerning passenger seats. That means seats other than the driver's seat. So you cover all the seats in a vehicle. Yes. So that means all the seats other than the driver's seat, they will be regarded as passenger seats. Because on page 9, it is stated that it is a driver's seat or the specified passenger seat. So you're not referring to all the passenger seats here. For specified passenger seat, we are referring to the passenger seat on the front row. Thank you, I got it. Ms. Lillian Koch. Chairman, I want to ask about special purpose vehicles. What vehicles are we talking about here? Ms. Zhang, can you clarify us on that? For special purpose vehicle, we will defer to CAP 374. Under CAP 374, SPVs means vehicles that have been modified or constructed to use for not carrying passengers or goods. Any question, Ms. Koch? Can you make it clearer? So if we are passengers and goods, they will be regarded as specific purposes. But can you quote an example of specified purpose vehicles? Well, thank you. For the SPVs, they will cover, street cleansing vehicles or vehicles with cranes for lifting goods. These are examples. Well, Mr. Mack has actually explained about this. These are special purpose vehicles. They are not meant for carrying passengers. Of course, there will be sometimes seats other than the driver's seat for accommodating the co-worker on the special purpose vehicle. But they are not meant for carrying passengers. So for the SPVs, they will be illustrated as specified purpose vehicle. Ms. Kwok, are you content with the explanation? Yes, I think we have to be very clear about the wordings. I think you should give examples so that the citizens can understand what you're talking about. Mr. Ho? Well, for the next clause, can the government point out to me the answer to the question I raised earlier? I didn't see any wording stating passenger seats, because in the latter part of the legislation, you have very clear wordings about rear seats or middle seats. So, Ms. Zhang, when you come across such provisions, please point them out to us. Please carry on. Now we are on Clause 6, page 11. It is amending Clause 6A of the existing legislation for the middle rear seats, the seat belts and the anchorage points for such seats will be extended to vehicles first registered after the 25th of January 2026, with the exception of school private light bus. Any questions from members? Please carry on. Clause 7, we're looking at page 12 of the markup copy, Clause 6B. For the existing requirement concerning the seatbelts and anchorage point for rear seats of private cars, taxi, GVs, and SPVs will be extended to such vehicles registered after the 25th of January 2026. So this is the point raised by Mr. Stephen Ho. So it is rather clearly stated here. We are talking about the rear seats and the middle seats. I understand that you are now spelling out the point in two clauses. I got it. Now, Clause 8, page 13 of the markup copy, we amend Clause 6C. We extend the requirements concerning seat belts and anchorage points for the rear seats of PLBs to PLBs first registered on or after 25th of January 2026, with the exception of school private light bus. Any questions? Please carry on. Clause 9. On page 14 of the markup copy, we add subdivision 2, the heading, requirement to wear seat belts. It is specified that for private cars, taxis, light buses, there are requirements regarding the requirement to wear seat belts in such vehicles. So you're just adding a heading here, yes. Clause 10, Page 16 and 17 of the markup copy, we amend Clause 7A here. It concerns taxi, light buses, special purpose vehicles, so the drivers and the passengers are required to wear seat belts. So anyone, if they ride on such vehicles, they have to wear the seat belt. Any questions? Ms. Zhang, here you say that school private light bus will not be covered. So you will deal with that later on, right? Yes, it will be dealt with in the latter part of the amendment regulation. Please carry on. Clause 11, page 18 and 19 of the markup copy, we amend Regulation 7B. This concerns private cars, taxi, PLBs, and SPVs. The rear seat passengers would have to wear seat belts. Anyone riding in such vehicles provided with a seat belt, they must wear the seat belt. Ms. Lillian Kok? Sorry, can I go back to page 17, bracket 4? For the new edition, it is stated that for a special purpose vehicle, if there is a specified vehicle with a passenger under the age of 15, and there is no provision of seatbelt for such seat, and they are not securely fastened, then no one can drive this SPV. So does that mean that when the vehicle is being driven, the passenger, if he is under the age of 15 and he take off the seatbelt, does it mean that the driver will have to stop the vehicle immediately? How are we going to handle such a situation? Is Ms. Kwok's understanding correct? That means while the vehicle is being driven, if the passenger takes off the seatbelt, the driver, is he required to stop the vehicle immediately? Thank you for the question. We think that the driver can remind the passenger to wear the seatbelt as soon as possible. So after reminding the passenger, if the passenger still refuses to wear the seatbelt, does the driver has to stop the vehicle? He should stop it if it is possible to do so. I think we got to be clear about this. So the driver remind the passenger, but the passenger refused to wear the seatbelt, then the driver will stop the vehicle. Under such circumstances, the liability does not lie with the driver. Is that correct? I think it is important to understand this. Well, I think Ms. Kwok has raised a critical point here. If the driver tries his best to stop the vehicle, if a police officer comes forward, then he can have a reasonable explanation and he has discharged his responsibility. And the passenger will have to shoulder the liability. I'm asking them whether that would be the case. Ms. Zhang? Well, for the penalties, we have added the point of reasonable excuse. If the driver has already reminded the passenger to wear the seatbelt, that will be accepted as a reasonable excuse, and the driver can discharge his liability. Ms. Lexi Lam? Thank you, Chair. Well, this question actually is the same as the very first one that I raised on the question of responsibility and liability. As I have said before, the ultimate person to be responsible should be the driver. You said that you're giving them the excuse of a reasonable excuse, but how many times does he have to put up an excuse to be regarded as reasonable? If he has reminded the passenger to wear the seatbelt for once, you may say that it is not enough. You have to ask the driver to remind them several times and even to stop the vehicle. Is that what you want to do? Thank you, Ms. Lam. I think we have to look at the individual circumstances. I think the court will take into account the circumstances of each case to see whether the driver's reminder of the passenger to wear seatbelt is a reasonable excuse. I think if we have to go to the court, then I think it will not be desirable. We have to really clarify the situation for drivers of this type of vehicles. In future, what will be the protection for them? And they need to know what they should do. If you require them to stop the vehicle, then I will ask the drivers to do so. You must stop the vehicle. If not, then the driver is only required to give several reminders and they do not have to stop the vehicle. I think we have to really be clear about this point, and it's not good to defer the case to the court. Well, thank you. I think for the police enforcement, they will issue guidelines and they will also make a judgment on the spot. Maybe I can ask my colleagues from the police department to supplement. Well, thank you, Ms. Lam. For Annex D of the paper, we have stated the different liabilities. And for the amendment regulation, we actually require the passengers to be held responsible if they are not wearing seat belts, unless they have a reasonable excuse. And there may be exemption situations. Otherwise, the passengers would have to be responsible for their own acts. Under most circumstances, we don't think the driver would have to be responsible for the passengers on his vehicle who are not wearing seatbelts.
Ms. Lam, I think this is contradictory. On the one side, you said that the responsibility should be on the drivers, but on the other side, you said that if a passenger is under the age of 15 and if he's not wearing a seat belt, then no one is allowed to drive that car on any road. That is, if the passenger refuses to wear a seat belt, then the driver has the responsibility to stop the vehicle. That is the question that I've just asked at the first instance. And up to now, you seem to have changed your answer. At first you said it's the passenger's responsibility, and now you're telling us that the driver should stop the vehicle. It seems that we are going back to square one, and I don't think you have answered our question properly. My question is it the responsibility of the driver ultimately that if his passenger refuses to wear a seatbelt, he has to stop the vehicle? If not, he'll be held liable. Well, I think the problem is whether the passenger is 15 or below. Well, exactly, that's what we're asking. Passenger under the age of 15. All right, for a passenger under the age of 15, I believe that the police, when carrying law enforcement, the police will look carefully whether the driver has reminded the passenger to wear his seatbelt. Any representative from the police? Let me reiterate. The most important point is that the driver should provide a reasonable excuse. He has to prove whether he has made his utmost effort to remind the passenger to wear a seatbelt. And if all the reminding and the warning have been neglected, then under safe conditions, he should stop the vehicle. And I believe that our colleagues will make a judgment according to the actual situation. Well, the scenario just pointed out by Ms. Lam, shall we put it in a different way? For instance, a minibus is moving in a highway, and if a driver notices that a passenger is not wearing a seat belt, and if he reminds the passenger time and again to wear a seat belt to no avail, then he should try to stop his minibus under a safe circumstance. And if a police officer comes up, would the driver be held liable? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Lam. Let me reiterate. Our colleague, when carrying out law enforcement, would consider all practical situation. And for instance, if it's on a highway or in a tunnel, the driver can't stop his vehicle right away. If the driver has reminded the passenger to wear his seat belt, if the driver can provide this kind of evidence to show that he has already made an effort to remind the passengers, then I believe that our police officer would consider that as a reasonable excuse. and the situation would be handled in a practical manner, practical and reasonable manner. Ms. Lillian Kwok, well, we talked about a highway. Well, actually, I've seen a car. Well, actually, I was in a car and I heard the police, a car behind us, broadcasting a warning and asking us to stop because the police officer thought that one of the passengers did not wear a seat belt. Well, but if on the highway it is not safe to stop a car, if it's a double solid line on a highway, does it mean that the driver must stop his vehicle if one of the passengers doesn't wear a seatbelt? What if the police officer comes up and said that, well, this is a very dangerous place to stop your vehicle? Well, how are you going to handle the situation? Mr. Leung? Well, I think the main point is to see whether the driver has or is able to provide evidence showing that he has already made his effort to remind the passenger to wear a seatbelt. And our police colleague will make his judgment according to the actual situation. The passenger, if he refuses to wear a seatbelt, of course he should be held liable. And second, for the driver, well, he should provide evidence to show that he has already reminded the passenger to wear a seatbelt. And third, about the place to stop the vehicle, of course, the driver, as a professional driver, he has to make a judgment. He has to make all sort of safety measures before he stops the vehicle, for instance, from the fast lane, moving to a slow lane, and then to slowly stop his vehicle and wait for a police to come. So I think we have to consider it on a case-by-case basis. All right. If the vehicle is stopped and if the kid under the age of 15 still refuses to wear a seatbelt, and if I, as a driver, continue to remind him to wear a seatbelt, and then a police officer comes up and give me an electronic ticket right away, so what sort of reasonable evidence should I give, or reasonable excuse should I provide under such a situation? Well, our colleague will ask a number of questions to see whether it is suitable for the driver to continue to drive his car, and whether it is a safe place and the right place to stop the vehicle. There might be different kind of reasons to stop the car or not stop the car. So I think we have to consider it on a case-by-case basis. But when the regulation is in force, we will provide training to our colleagues, and there will be guidelines as well for our colleagues to carry out law enforcement. Thank you. Next, Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, Chair. I think, Chairman, you have already cited one of the examples. First, about reasonable excuse. Well, of course, the police officers are usually very experienced. They would consider all sorts of practical situation. They would not just give you a ticket without considering the actual situation. But of course, there might be gray area, as pointed out by Ms. Lim. I think the administration, especially the TD or the operators, it could be the school bus operators or the bus operators, I think guidelines should be provided to them in advance. While for the drivers, it might be difficult for you to inform the driver, each and every one driver. So I think guidelines should be provided. And well, of course, in the tunnel, it is not a suitable place to stop your vehicle. Well, I think the drivers would need to accumulate his experience to handle all sorts of situations. But before the regulation is put in force, I think we have to work out a set of guidelines and also provide enough time to carry out publicity campaigns and educate the drivers so as to let them know what should be done under the different kind of situation. I agree with Ms. Lam that, of course, it is not an ideal situation to carry these cases to the court in each and every instance. Well, in the future, I believe that the administration should consider striking a good balance and spare enough time to carry out publicity. We should make sure that the drivers or the passengers should be treated fairly. Mr. Mak or Ms. Cheng, any response from you? Well, thank you, members, for your reminders. Before the enforcement of the ordinance, of course, we will carry out a publicity campaign. For passengers on the front seats in private cars and minibus, they would be held responsible if they are not wearing a seat belt. For the drivers, they are also responsible to remind the passengers. We already have this kind of guidelines at present. We will accumulate or collect this kind of experiences. We will then work out new guidelines, perhaps give different kind of scenarios so as to let the drivers understand what sort of proper action should be taken. We would also let the police have ample information about how to handle these kind of situation. We might also come up with different suggestions. And we will collect opinions from the drivers of different vehicles and then try to work out the guidelines, proper guidelines for all the stakeholders. All right, no further questions. Let's move on. Ms. Cheng? Yes, Chair, we just finished Clause 11. Let's move on to Clause 12. It's on page 20 of the marked up copy. That is to amend Clause 8. It's regarding 7, 7A, and 7B. If the driver is performing a maneuver that includes reversing, then these regulations would not apply. All right. Any questions? Ms. Kwok. Well, for buses, it would include non-franchise bus, right? Is that correct? Ms. Cheng? Regarding franchise bus, it will be dealt with in a separate section under the section of buses. So we're not on page 21 yet, right? No, we're still on page 20. I'm sorry, we're still on page 20. All right. If there's no question, let's move on to page 21. Ms. Cheng? Clause 13, page 21 is to add Division 2 and also Subdivision 1. Division 2 is on buses. Subdivision 1 is on seat belts and anchorage points. Ms. Kwok? Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have a questions about buses. Are franchised and non-franchised buses included under this division? Yes, this is correct. All right. If that is the case, then I have a follow-up question. In here, you have added bracket 4A. It says that this regulation does not apply to a bus that is a student service vehicle, SSV. And for the bus registration, there are sometimes number 8 kind of registrations. So they do not belong to class 3 or type 3 of registration, but then they might be taking student passengers. It might be commissioned by a school to carry out school activities, and this kind of buses are also carrying student passengers. So under this scenario, should it be under Division 2, or should it be regarded as a student service vehicle? Ms. Chang? Well, thank you. Yes, indeed, there would be such a situation. But then the requirement on seat belts are the same for these two types of vehicles. Any colleagues from TD would like to take this question? Mr. Tang? Yes, Mr. Tang? Yes, that's correct. What Ms. Chang has said is correct. I'm sorry, Chairman. The reason why I raised this question is because when you were answering Ms. Nixie Lam and other colleagues, you mentioned that for the student service vehicles, the passengers would be held liable to wear a seat belt. But then for buses, would the passengers also be held liable if they're not wearing seat belt? Ms. Chang, yes. Yes. Yes, they would be the same. Like Annex D, the passengers would be held liable if they're not wearing a seatbelt, be they on an SSV or on a bus. All right, no further question. Let's move on. Clause 14, marked up copy, page 21, is to amend 8A regarding seatbelts and anchorage points in buses. We have some textual amendments here. And bracket 4A says that this regulation does not apply to a bus that is a student service vehicle. Clause 15 on page 22 is to add clause 8AB. It's on seatbelts and anchorage points for passengers' seats. Well, this regulation applies to every bus first registered on or after 25th of January 2026, but does not apply to a bus that is an SSV. Ms. Chang, could you perhaps explain to us why this clause? Well, actually, this clause, the wording is is similar to 8A, right? Yes. We're just trying to make it clearer to put it here. All right. Any questions regarding clause 8AB? If not, Ms. Chang, please move on. Clause 15. It's on page 22 to add 8AB regarding seat belts and anchorage points for passengers' seat. Well, this regulation applies to every bus first registered on or after 25th of January 2026, but does not apply to a bus that is a student service vehicle. Any questions? No? Please move on. Clause 16, markup copy, page 23. It's to amend clause 3 to add subdivision 2 on requirement to wear seat belts. It states set out the requirement about passengers wearing a seat belt. The requirement for passengers to wear seat belt. Clause 17, page 23. It's a technical amendment. It's just amending heading of 8B. All right, clause 18, page 24, is to add clause 8D, stating that passengers are required to wear seat belts. For passengers that are riding in a bus that has a seat belt installed, then the passenger must wear the seat belt. Clause 19. Page 24 to 29, pages 24 to 29, amendment to Division 3. Division 3 student service vehicles. Subdivision 1 is on seat belts and anchorage points. It's regarding the seat belts on the driver's seat. And subdivision 2, it's on the requirement to wear seat belts for drivers and passengers. Ms. Kwok? I'd like to remind members that this meeting is scheduled to end at 4:45. Since we have another meeting scheduled, and it will start 15 minutes later, that is at 5 p.m. sharp. If Ms. Kwok allows, perhaps we should end this present meeting first, and we will come back and resume the meeting at 5 p.m. Ms. Kwok will continue to put your question across, and the administration will answer your questions. All right? All right, this is the end of the first meeting. The next meeting will begin at 5 p.m. Thank you very much.
唔該晒。